Did you hear that, Vetus? Even the phone is dead. If you're like me, there's nothing better for Halloween than some classic monster films, particularly the Universal monsters. All the big names, Dracula, Frankenstein, and others from the early 1930s and into the 1940s. I thought today we'd take a look at some of the home video releases at various points in their history, and maybe learn about how these monsters evolved over time on home video. I hope you enjoy that, and maybe you'll see a few releases that you have in your collection. So let's kick off in the 1980s, when VHS was really kind of starting to take over. Here are some early releases from about 1985 of some monster films. Here's from 1932, Boris Karloff in The Mummy with Zita Johann. Not a big fan of The Mummy, my least favorite of the Universal monsters, but Karloff is really good in this. Got some really cool scenes. I like it. It's worth watching. The sequel's not so much. Also, from about 1985 or 1986, here's a VHS release of the much more famous 1931 Frankenstein. This tape is especially interesting, as this is the edited reissue version. If you remember when I did my key video review, I talked about my copy of The Public Enemy was edited to remove certain scenes that were seen as objectionable. This tape of Frankenstein is missing the scenes where Frankenstein accidentally drowns a little, where the monster, I should say, accidentally drowns a little girl. We just see the beforehand and then the aftermath of that, not the actual drowning. And also a scene where, I should say dialogue, not really a scene even, of Henry Frankenstein comparing himself to God. That was kind of snipped out as well. We'll come back to Frankenstein though. Here's from 1987. This is the 1943 version of Phantom of the Opera, the one with Claude Rains. We'll talk about the Lon Chaney silent version, the original, next week when we look at other horror classics. I love Claude Rains. He's good in anything. He's in several of these movies. Not a big fan of this version of Phantom of the Opera, though. It's a little too sedate, I think. They needed some bigger action or bigger horror set pieces like the silent version had. These next two, 1941's The Wolf Man and 1933's The Invisible Man, my favorite, even wearing my Invisible Man shirt. These ones from about 1980, 87, 88, these ones were part of Gene Shalit's Critics Picks line. He endorsed a line of VHS tapes. You see his likeness at the bottom. He was a film critic for the Today Show. Family Guy makes fun of him a lot, but these were ones from his series there. Both instant classics. We'll get more into them when we get to DVD, but definite must-sees. And the original Invisible Man is probably my favorite film of all these old monster classics. Actually, the oldest video I have for Universal Monsters is this 1984 tape, The Raven and the Black Cat. The Raven and the Black Cat are kind of in the second tier of Universal Monsters because they don't really have monsters per se in them, but they have a lot of the same actors and directors and things like that, so they kind of tie in really easily. Maybe not directors, I'm not sure, but actors for certain. And The Raven from 1935, Bela Lugosi as a scientist obsessed with Edgar Allan Poe, Karloff as a psychotic killer. Really fun movie, got a lot of goofy set pieces in it, but it's enjoyable. The Black Cat from 1934, the second half of this double feature, even though chronologically it comes first. But the second half of the feature there, the Black Cat is pretty freaky. It's different. A lot of people don't like it. Some people love it and say it's the best one. We have a person being skinned alive. Granted, it's done in silhouette, but still kind of disturbing. Dead women preserved in glass cases, and Karloff implies they still serve some kind of purpose to him. Yeah, it is weird. It's kind of something I think that was ahead of its time. It's going as much for schlock as it was for shock, and it does not feel like a film made in 1934. It's different, and they make for a weird double feature, because neither of them are really Poe adaptations, but The Raven borrows very heavily from Edgar Allan Poe. The Black Cat just uses the title, because there was a big Poe resurgence in the mid-30s and stuff. I don't know. They're both fascinating movies, and I like that they're on one video. And we'll come back to them later on, too. The sequels, with the possible exception of Bride of Frankenstein, are also kind of seen as second-tier monster movies. You know, they're not like major household names. So in the later 80s, a little bit later on, we get some of them released to home video. Here is from 1989, a Son of Frankenstein VHS, Basil Rathbone as the son of Dr. Frankenstein, Boris Karloff in his final official turn as the monster, Bela Lugosi in his first appearance as Igor. A really good movie, actually, and one that shows, I think, the biggest issue with the Frankenstein monster is that he's not really a character, he's more of a plot element. You can definitely kind of see that here. You know, it's these characters, Lugosi, Rathbone, and Lionel Atwill kind of manipulating for control or possession of him, and it's an interesting bit, too. And one of the last Universal monster films that was meant to be kind of like a serious movie, you know, that was designed for adults as well as for children. So then we move on a little bit to the early 90s, and this is the part where many of you are going to be able to jump in. You might remember the Universal Monster Classics. Classic monster films at a price to die for. And you could get, in the original run, Dracula and Frankenstein. You could get The Bride of Frankenstein, The Wolf Man, The Invisible Man, The Mummy, The Son of Dracula, The Phantom of the Opera, and The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And they were also, at this point, beginning to market gift sets and things like that. You can see a little box set there. You can see like a documentary thing. Pretty cool stuff, really. Different. So let's look at some of those releases. I am Dracula. I bid you welcome. The first supernatural, all-talking horror film. Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make. Dracula has aged pretty badly. It's very stagey. It's very subdued, but honestly, Bela Lugosi's performance makes it worth watching, and it's a must historically, regardless of how you feel about the finished film. It's very important, and Lugosi's great, although that likeness of him, he looks somewhat perplexed. Another from that early wave of classic horror titles with monstrous new art, 1954's Creature from the Black Lagoon. True, it's more science fiction than it is horror, but at the same time, Creature from the Black Lagoon, other way, did a lot of stuff for the aquatic monster movie genre. Today we think of things like Shape of Water and whatnot. Those would not have existed if it wasn't for Creature from the Black Lagoon. These original horror videos were so successful that it wasn't long before they started churning out a sequel series, both with sequels for these films and also for other horror films at the time. Here are a few. Revenge of the Creature, the first sequel to Creature from the Black Lagoon. This is best remembered today for making it all the way to Mystery Science Theater 3000. It's not that bad, but they get a lot of mileage out of the movie, including Clint Eastwood's film debut. Pretty cool. One of the Mummy sequels, The Mummy's Hand. Probably the most popular of the Mummy sequels. I'm not a big fan. The Mummy movies don't usually do it for me. And then some of the ones that weren't monsters per se, but Universal owned the rights to. One of the best, probably my second favorite after The Invisible Man, Paramount Pictures did Island of Lost Souls in 1932. And that with Charles Laughton as Dr. Moreau, based on the wonderful book by H.G. Wells. Such a classic film, big influence on Devo. I also have this cool VHS tape of it with the plastic case, and you push on the side and it pops open there. It used to pop, now it just kind of slowly glides, but I thought that was kind of neat. I don't see too many cases like that. There are many more titles. The Black Cat, The Raven, Son of Frankenstein, they all got reissued. Almost all of the sequels came out there, so really cool to see. Then we roll around to the end of the 90s. The major ones got reissued on VHS and DVD. and they had original poster art for the covers. This is the only one I have, the Frankenstein DVD. Frankenstein was now fully restored. Those scenes I mentioned earlier that were snipped out for being objectionable were put back in, so we could finally see the authentic 1931 Frankenstein. As far as I know, the VHS tapes, which again share the same box art, didn't really have bonus features. This has several. I think the VHS tapes just had like a trailer or something like that, but pretty cool. So this was to usher in the new millennium. And when DVD officially killed VHS, we could finally get box sets. These are the Legacy collections. These had all the films in a particular series. I have two. There's Frankenstein. Here's the Wolfman for you. Even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. So these ones are hated by fans today because of their weird packaging. So this is just a slipcase. Comes off. You get this inner thing here. Open it up. Bit of protective foam. Some of the discs have art and some don't, but the ones that do not, they are double-sided discs, and they get scuffed and scratched and messed up very easily. So a lot of people dislike these sets for that reason alone. And this particular set, I do like the packaging though with the artwork and stuff. This particular set, you can see what all it includes there. Get Frankenstein and most of its sequels here. House of Frankenstein, I don't think it ever come to VHS. I think Ghost of Frankenstein had. I like Ghost of Frankenstein. I think it's pretty good. House of Frankenstein's pretty silly, but it does what it's supposed to do. And it's got Boris Karloff, so it can't be that bad, but definitely something different there. Here's the Wolfman set real quick. Front there, same idea. And if you take off, you can see. Got the double-side disc there. Mine are a little scuffy. They were scuffy even when I bought them, but they do their thing. There we go. This has Werewolf of London from 1935. No, not the song. The original movie. I really like that one. I like that one better than the Wolfman. It also has She-Wolf of London, which never really caught on. Next week we'll talk about a very important non-universal horror film, Cat People, and when we talk about that we'll get more into She-Wolf of London because it's much more of that type of horror film than one of the big Monster-ramas, that kind of thing. So get these out of the way. Jump ahead a little. Not all of those movies in that VHS series made it into nice collections like that. Some of the oddballs, like the Black Cat and the Raven, there was no special set for Poe adaptations. They got put into sets like this, as well as Murders in the Rue Morgue, which was also part of the VHS line. Here's a Bela Lugosi collection for you. So it has those three Poe adaptations that were part of the Universal Monster series, and then it has The Invisible Ray and Black Friday, which were not. Both of which fit right in, though. This is a really fun set. Lugosi sometimes gets overshadowed by Boris Karloff, but he was just as good in his own way. Or 1939's Tower of London, a Shakespearean horror film, did not get put into some kind of Shakespearean horror set. Instead, it made it to this Boris Karloff collection. Some of the other titles in this release, like The Climax and The Strange Door, those were issued on VHS as part of the Universal, I think it was Universal Horror Classics line. So they were kind of combining the different properties and different series as they owned to make new DVD releases that they thought would be most appropriate for current audience. When Universal turned 100 years old in 2012, we got some nice sets like this. Here's just a very simple 4-pack, Frankenstein, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Bride of Frankenstein. No frills, but nice to have a bunch of different ones in one place. Universal did a lot of these type of 3- and 4-packs, usually with different themes, like award winners, or I have the one that has like Smokey and the Bandit and stuff in it, like a country classics thing. Pretty cool stuff. And then we come to a Criterion release, Island of Lost Souls. That didn't make it to home video again till the early 2010s, and it got released on DVD and Blu-ray. I believe it's the only Universal monster film to be part of the Criterion collection. Very nice release. A lot of cool stuff on this one. Alright, as I almost dropped my monsters. In about 2015, 2016, we get the reissue the Legacy collection. So this was to update those green ones that had a lot of good movies but no one really liked for a new generation. They included Abbott and Costello horror films. A lot of people knock those, but they're actually really good. I would argue they're some of Bud and Lou's best films, especially Meet Frankenstein and Meet the Invisible Man. And I like Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. A lot of people don't, but I really enjoy it. So here's the Dracula one, which has Dracula. The Spanish version, which is listed under bonus features, not under like the actual movies. Dracula's Daughter, Son of Dracula, House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, because Dracula is in that, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And these were nice enough to get rid of those cruddy, double-sided, scratched-up discs, and we get nice packaging, info for the movies, and then discs all single-sided. And that carries over for every release in this series. My Man, the Invisible Man. So we have the original from 1933. The first sequel, The Invisible Man Returns, with Vincent Price. Almost as good, but not quite. The Invisible Woman, which I can't stand. It's a comedy and it sucks. Invisible Agent, The Invisible Man Against Nazis. It's 1940s. It's exactly what you'd expect. It's fun, though. The Invisible Man's Revenge from 1944, which is a cool one. It doesn't really follow this movie. Just because these were series, that doesn't mean that they actually followed like a chronological story. There are all kinds of different changes and plot elements and stuff, and no continuity. And you know what? That's okay. And then Bud and Lou Meet the Invisible Man, which is a really good one. I like that one. So that's pretty cool. There are only 3 films for Creature from the Black Lagoon. I showed you 2. They're both here along with The Creature Walks Among Us, where they make the creature's respiratory system so he can inhabit land instead of water. It's an interesting premise. Here's the Mummy series, my least favorite of the lot. The Mummy, The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Curse, and my favorite, Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. So, but hey, if you like mummy movies, you'll get a kick out of these. Pretty neat. And then there was a big set with just the major ones in it. Here's the glow-in-the-dark Walmart box. To make this glow, do what other people on YouTube do. You put it in a dark room, take a flashlight, shine the flashlight on it, turn it off, and it'll glow green. Not orange, but green. And this set, stylized much the same as the others, has just those core monster films that you see below. Pretty nifty. And then one more little treat. I'm pretty sure everything I just showed you on DVD made it to Blu-ray, either as part of a set or as a single, like this Invisible Man. I don't have too many of the Blu-rays, but this one I had to have because the Invisible Man's my favorite. So just be aware, you can still find these films if you have a big monster collection you want to upgrade, or if you just want to gather some more of these wonderful old-time films. Can't recommend it enough. I hope you enjoyed today's video and didn't get too frightened. Please leave in the comments below what your favorite monster character is and what 30s or 40s horror films you'd like to talk about when we come back for part 2 next week. Hope to see you then, and until that time, check and see if your phone is dead.